So, well, we've been interested in blockchain and cryptocurrency for, I don't know, a year or more-ish. Yeah, half a year. Yeah. I always like to exaggerate. And we've wanted to do a talk on it for a while. But we realised that in order to talk really about what blockchain is, you need to understand what cryptocurrency is. And really, before you can start to talk about what cryptocurrency is, we need to understand, well, what is currency? And once you start delving into that, it's actually quite an exciting story full of, it's a lusty tale of adventure full of like swords and spices and ships and that kind of thing. But why we use money is quite interesting. And cryptocurrency was invented to fill some of the holes that our current system of currency has in it. So I think it's useful to look at the problem first. So in this first talk today, we're going to talk about what currency is and what holes there are in the system. We're going to talk a little bit about Bitcoin, which is an example of a cryptocurrency. And then in the next talk, we'll talk more in depth about the various different types of cryptocurrencies you have. And then we'll know enough to start a talk on blockchain, which will be talk 3. So we thought we'd do a talk every 2 weeks or so, just to get us started. So Ionut, I'm going to try a new format as well, like this kind of interview format. Ionut, what is money?
Well, that's a very good question, and tick the box. I've been asking myself this question more and more when I developed an interest in Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, and for me to understand why we have money and why it's being useful, I went back to history and I had to understand what is bartering. So bartering basically is a system when people exchange goods or services between themselves. For example, if I have an iPhone and I'd like an Xbox, and my friend has an Xbox and he wants an iPhone, I can give him my iPhone, he gives me his Xbox, and everybody is happy. But then what if I want an Xbox, but my friend doesn't want an iPhone, he wants a Google Pixel because he thinks that is cool. Then we're a bit in a situation because we can't exchange our goods.
Yeah.
In the same way, if I'm a farmer and I have apples, but I need wool for various reasons, I can go to a shepherd, he gives me wool, I give him apples, and the same story, everybody is happy. But then, if the shepherd doesn't want apples, he needs anything else, we can't trade.
So it's useful to have something that everybody agrees on as a store of value. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, and that's why people actually invented money, in order to be able to do barter faster, to exchange goods. So instead of I have a good and I give it to somebody else, I have a good, I get money for it, and I can use that money and buy other goods or services for somebody else. And back in this history, these are actually coins from 2,000 years ago. When money was invented, people were actually using coins made of precious metals, because this is what was considered a good sort of value back then. And
so back in those days, the coins itself, the currency itself, had some intrinsic value.
Has an intrinsic value, exactly, because gold, for example, can be turned into jewelry. People can wear jewelry and can affirm, let's say, their status in society. And that was the main driver behind using precious metals for coins.
So if I give you some of my wool and you give me a coin, then that's okay, because I've got something which is valuable that I can then, even if I don't want to do anything else with it, I want to keep it, it's of some use to me. But then something interesting happened with the shift from coinage through to paper money.
Yes, coins, they are difficult to transfer from one place to another. For example, I'm a Romanian and I moved from Romania to Britain for weird reasons, and then what do? I take all these coins with me? It's a bit difficult. And people, for humanity as a society, they invented banknotes, which is actually a piece of paper, and this is a picture of an older banknote, which states I owe you, or I promise to pay the bearer X amount of pounds or whatever currency they were exchanging at that specific point in time. And they could actually take that paper, go to somebody else or to a bank, and instead of that paper they would receive gold or silver, depending on what they would receive in return.
So this I've got a £10 note, and it actually still says on it, I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £10. So does that mean I can take it to the Bank of England now and get £10 of gold?
Well, that would be awesome if you could do that. Unfortunately, you only can get in return another £10, which is still valuable. You can use it to buy various things at shops around, but you can no longer get gold instead of it.
So are they no longer linked then?
They're no longer linked because United Kingdom decided to remove gold as a backing for for pounds in 1931, if I remember correctly, because the society back then was what was called the Big Depression, and it was a way for them to move the economy forward and incentivize people to move goods and services faster by creating more money in the economy. Because if they were reliant on gold, there is just X amount of gold that exists on the planet, and you can't increase the amount of money.
So there's more paper, there's more of these IOUs saying I promise to pay you something than there is gold in the world to back that up.
Yes, absolutely, because more people need access to money at the same time. You know, the population of the planet is growing, we need more money, and that way we no longer have this reliance on gold or silver.
I think what's really interesting, that sounds like it's not real. You know, that £10 note in my pocket is really it's a myth that we all just believe, and it's a useful myth, and it's a myth that allows us to bind ourselves together as a society. But it's something that we just choose to believe. Why is gold of value? It's just because people like they either they like the colour, or because they've agreed as individuals that okay, let's all agree that this is worth like 5,000 Starbucks coffees or something. And so it's the same about this mythical thing called a pound.
Absolutely, it's actually the value of a pound will always be £1, because this is it, it's nothing more than that. But what you can do with that £1 is whatever society decides at one point in time, you can do with that pound. For example, I can use £1 now and go coffee at Starbucks. Maybe later on society thinks, oh, I can no longer buy a coffee, I can buy 2 coffees for whatever reason. It's the same with gold. The value of gold is whatever society decides or a group of people decides the value is. It's just something that we as groups, we put into it.
So I wasn't exaggerating earlier when I said I've got £10. I literally only have £10. Most of my money is not in paper form. It's in my bank, and so there's a database, a ledger somewhere that somebody with a quill perhaps has gone and written in Peet Denny with this account number has got. I've actually got £20 in my account. So is that how money works around the world now?
Yes, absolutely, because money, physical money, paper money or coins, they are difficult to transport from one place to another, and that way banks, they have informatic IT systems. We do work in IT, everybody knows how they work, and they just have an information which states Peet Denny has X amount of money, or Ionut has X amount of money in this account, so they are all just numbers. For example, if you think pounds or dollars or euros, nobody knows exactly how many exist in physical form. You could theoretically say there is X amount of euros in the entirety of the banking system on the planet, but that's still difficult to decide, because banks, or the institutions, they create more money depending on various reasons, and then those money they get transferred in cash and they move somewhere else, so it's difficult to know exactly how much money exists at a specific point in time.
So most of my money is in one or two accounts, Monzo, which I can highly recommend, and one of the other high street banks that you'll have heard of. And I suppose I'm happy to do that because I trust those guys. They've been around for as long as my parents have been around, and so I kind of trust that they're going to be around a bit longer, and they're going to do the right thing by me. But it's interesting that if you think about central banks, who here trusts the UK central bank? And what about the UK government? Yes, so some people in the room. What about the Uzbekistani government? Okay, fewer. Right, so I think if we were to ask that same question in Uzbekistan, we'd get the opposite answer, wouldn't we? And most people would, we'd have a similar number of people putting their hand up to say that they trusted their government, but weren't so sure about our government, English pig dogs. And so I think what that illustrates is that there's no one central authority that everybody trusts in the world, is there?
Yes, that is correct, and that's one of the reasons for which cryptocurrencies were invented, because the underlying technology of cryptocurrencies is based on mathematics, and everywhere you go on this planet you have 2 + 2 they equal 4. It doesn't change. And cryptocurrencies, they are based on cryptographic algorithms and mathematics to prove their identity. They exist only on IT systems, and it's easier to trust something that is unbreakable.
So I think that's like the fundamental property of cryptocurrencies is around this trust. Really, if one of the fundamental things around money is around trust then one of the fundamental things of cryptocurrency is around trust.
Yeah, because it's much easier to trust a system which has been proven since the beginning of history. When maths has been invented, everybody trusts numbers and how they add and subtract. But people are less willing to trust organizations, especially in these days.
So when Bitcoin was invented, so we're going to talk about Bitcoin for a bit now. When Bitcoin was invented, it was actually two major inventions, wasn't it? Bitcoin and blockchain that we're going to talk about in a future talk. Can you tell us a bit about the Bitcoin side of things?
Yes, Bitcoin it's the most known cryptocurrency, and it's using blockchain as a technology, the backend technology, where blocks are being created and they are added onto a ledger, and as more blocks are created, every new existing block is created based on the blocks which already exist, and there are algorithms, hashing algorithms, which precisely determine when a new block will be created. And all transactions, if you have one Bitcoin and I send it to you, there is a transaction recorded on the Bitcoin ledger, and it's done, it's forever. It is reversible and immutable. And there are cryptographic algorithms which are actually validating the transaction in itself. And that's why these type of currencies, they are called cryptocurrencies. But they are permissionless in the way that everyone can go and read the ledger and can see, okay, this transaction was done from this source address to that source address. But writing in the way of sending a Bitcoin from one place to another, that is a permission thing. And it's a bit different. People use what is called wallets, and wallet is actually an address on the ledger itself. And to move tokens, because basically all these coins are tokens on the ledger, to move tokens from one address to another, you have to have a private key, and using that private key you can send.
So I think that's what's really interesting about cryptocurrencies, in that we're happy to pay our money into a bank, even though we've never been to that bank branch before. We don't know the people in there, but we're happy to take our massive sack of 2p pieces and hand them over, and trust that when we go to another bank somewhere else we can get them out. That's because we trust something really ephemeral and unreal, which is the reputation of that company. I think that's quite a profound idea.
The reputation of bank, and as we've seen in some cases, banks they do good things in terms they move economy forward, they create more wealth in the economy, but sometimes, as we've seen in 2007, they're not that trustworthy, and people do look for other systems, for example, for exchanging values from one person to another. If I'm using cryptocurrencies, for example, it doesn't have to go through intermediary systems. I'm directly sending value from me to the recipient.
Yeah. So the thing that we're trusting there is not a bank, but it's something that we've all said by our actions that we trust, and that's public-private key cryptography. So we all show every time we buy something online that we're happy that our credit card data is encrypted as it travels over the internet. So that's using the same thing, isn't it? We're not saying let's trust whoever's picture happens to be on our £10 note. Let's choose to trust two things. One is cryptography, that public and private key cryptography works really well. And the second thing, and this is going to be like the core of the third talk on blockchain, the second thing is that we trust that people will act in their own self-interests. So cryptography and blockchain are based on those two fundamental things. Cryptography and people's desire to act in their own self-interest, which are probably like inviolable principles of life. So what can you use Bitcoin for at the moment?
You can use it for many things. You can go, for example, if you are passionate about computer games, as I am, you can go on Steam, which is the biggest platform for buying computer games, and buy computer games from there. Or you can even go on Microsoft's website and buy computer games. On Dell, buy laptops and whatever they sell. Or you can go on Expedia.co.uk and buy travels or airplane tickets, hotel, rent car, and directly pay with Bitcoin from your account. You can even have a credit card backed by Bitcoin, and go and pay at POS, and transaction is completely transparent.
What's one Bitcoin worth at the moment?
It's always, as it will be, it's just one Bitcoin.
So what's it worth in pounds?
The worth in pounds, the value of pounds at the moment, I think, I don't know the pounds, but I know the value in dollars. It's around $4,000, and it fluctuates. It's quite volatile because this technology is still in early phases, and there are a lot of, it's being traded on various exchanges, and because it's not, the environment is not regulated yet, that way it goes ups and downs due to people influencing the price so they can gain more money. As Bitcoin is being seen as a good replacement for gold because it's easier to send value from one place to another if you use a technology like Bitcoin. It's just faster and cheaper. It's so cheap that everyone can do it. Even if you are, for example, in Antarctica and all you have is just some internet connection and you want to send money to somebody, just do it.
Can you show us that screen that shows all of the different cryptocurrencies that are available at the moment?
Sure. And if you're wondering how many cryptocurrencies exist, well, this is a website which is listing all the cryptocurrencies that exist, and in fact there are about 800-ish cryptocurrencies, all based on blockchain technology.
Could you scroll all the way back up to the top, please?
Yes.
So we've got, this is kind of in order of market share, market capitalization. So there's $70 billion in Bitcoin at the moment. So people have given their dollars to an exchange who then in return have given them a Bitcoin. You've got other ones like Ethereum, which is $27 billion market cap, and 143 billion in total of the world's money is in cryptocurrencies at the moment. And you can see from these charts, just how volatile they all are. And I think that they tend to all follow Bitcoin at the moment.
Yes, they all tend to follow Bitcoin because all these cryptocurrencies, they are traded against Bitcoin. What people usually do, they go and buy Bitcoin and then they trade it against everything that is down here. You can still go and trade some coins directly against dollar or pounds like Ethereum, Ripple, Litecoin and Dash, but most of them are traded against Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is seen as the main store of value in cryptocurrency world at the moment.
I think Ripple's quite an interesting one. It's kind of an odd one out from all of the others, and I think it's an odd one out because people have figured out that there's some underlying thing which is very useful here, other than this kind of pyramid scheme which is being used for at the moment. Can you just tell us in 30 seconds about Ripple?
Ripple is targeted at cross-border payments, and it's working closely with the banking industry. It's already being used in production in banks in Asia, and Bank of England signed a proof of concept with Ripple, and they use blockchain technology for settlement. At the moment, transfers they go through SWIFT system, and in order to send money, for example, from Canada to Germany, it takes at least 2 days, 2 to 5 days, and the fees are immense. When using Ripple technology, it takes 6 seconds. It doesn't matter from where to where, and the cost is less than a cent. It's like third part of a cent, I think, at the moment. And they create liquidity for banks. There are, I think, 100 billions of Ripple coins, if you wish. Yes.
So is that speed and cheapness a consequence of the fact that it's using blockchain, or the fact that it's a competitor who want to get into the market, regardless of what technology they're using? I presume Swift uses computer exchange to get there anyway, but Swift are I presume, are accompanying a mechanism, and so they are the dominant mechanism, so they charge how much it happens. Ripple are coming into the market and saying, we're trying to compete, so we're going to do it really cheap. What we're going to do is say we can do it quicker, but we know you don't trust us, we're also going to do it cheaper. So is there actually anything in the technology that makes it better and faster and more efficient than Swift, other than the fact that they've come in as basically a challenger and are trying to disrupt the market?
I can only give the answer that Ripple is giving. Definitely, blockchain by itself is not an enabler to faster and cheaper payments, but it definitely plays its part, and it's at the core of the entire system as the way created. They have a ledger protocol, which is an open source, and everyone can use it. And the cryptocurrency part is being used to provide liquidity, because if I have dollars and I want to send somebody and he's having euros, I can do that straight away, assuming I'm using Ripple, and actually dollars are being transferred to Ripple coin back to euros, and through their systems is going fast. And they use blockchain properties, the ledger property, the immutability property, to do these transactions and register transactions, because all banks, in fact, they have ledgers somewhere in one form or another, and they register things on the ledgers. There is a database somewhere, and all the information is stored there. Now, I can't give a very precise answer on your question, but my feeling is that by using blockchain, they enable them to go faster and cheaper.
I can answer that question. There's absolutely no reason whatsoever that they can't do it cheaper. So SWIFT has been the banking system for probably 100 years or more. They used to have a bank clearing system, so there used to be a load of old boys that would walk around the city of London from all the banks at the end of the day, swapping these, giant checks and stuff to balance it all out. That hasn't existed for probably 50 years, so it's all been automated. The only reason it still takes as long and costs as much is because all the banks have got together and decided that's what they're going to charge.
Yeah.
But all of these guys are now snapping at the heels.
But it's disrupted rather than technically something very different,
Yeah.
and therefore it's able to be cheaper. They're just trying to get to the market.
Yeah, no, totally.
I think it's really interesting that this thing which was invented to disrupt banking is actually being leapt on by the banking community. And if you go to the Ethereum meetup in London, which is the biggest meetup in the UK, it's run by Credit Suisse and companies like that. They can see the power behind it. So there's in the next couple of talks, we're going to talk a bit more about crypto next week. But I think the really interesting thing is blockchain, which is where we said that your bank with the Quill, they've got a ledger of how much money Peet Denny has and all the debits and credits. All of that can now be done in a very public, open, immutable ledger that is not owned by anybody. That's owned in a peer-to-peer way, in the way that name another peer-to-peer thing. My mind's gone blank. Napster. Yeah, BitTorrent. Yeah, don't want to show my age by saying Napster. It's the same kind of technology. So that is fundamentally super useful for lots and lots of applications in the world that are nothing to do with currency.
And everyone can participate in a network. For example, Bitcoin network can be run by everyone. I can run a node and I can be a participant in the Bitcoin network and I can verify transactions. And
yeah, in fact we are a participant in the Ethereum blockchain.
Yes.
We've got one running on Polaris at the moment. Nice.
Even on the Ripple network, anyone can spin up a validated node, as they call it, and they validate transactions.
I think you've got a question over here.
Yeah.
Okay, can we just say thanks? We'll take some questions in a sec, but that's the end of the talk. Was that a useful format?
Yeah, really
Yeah,
good.
very
Yeah?
good.
Yeah.
Very good.
Okay, thanks. Can we have a round of applause?